Hi, my name is Emma, and today we are going to be learning some new conversation expressions. So I don't know if you have seen my last video, conversation expressions, where we looked at as I was saying, speaking of, and if you ask me. This video is going to be similar. We're going to learn 3 new conversation expressions that are not really used in writing, only in conversation. So you will hear these expressions quite often, especially in movies and TV. And another thing that is important to realize is that when you learn these expressions, memorize them as a chunk. So what that means is, for example, that reminds me, remember it as a whole chunk of language. Okay, so what expressions are we going to be learning today? Well, of course, that reminds me. The second one is if worst comes to worst. And the third one is ring a bell. So let's get started. Okay, so that reminds me. When do we use that reminds me? So again, this is in a conversation. We use it when somebody says something in the conversation and it makes me remember something else. So it's kind of like, imagine a comic when that light bulb clicks, or turns on, I mean. When you see the light bulb and you think about something else. So it has to do with your memory and remembering things. So for example, I bought my boyfriend a PS3 for his birthday. Maybe somebody tells you that. That would be a very nice thing to do. Now, the second person in the conversation, so remember this is a conversation, might say, aha, keyword birthday. And they're reminded their boyfriend is having a birthday soon. So the conversation might look like this. I bought my boyfriend a PS3 for his birthday. First person says. Second person might say, that reminds me, my boyfriend's birthday is coming up too. Or my boyfriend's birthday is soon. I need to buy him a present as well. So again, we use this when what the first person says reminds you of something. And it's used at the beginning of what you're saying. So let's think of another example. Person 1 in the conversation might say, I saw a great movie on TV last night. The second person, suddenly that light bulb switches on. Oh, that reminds me. Did you hear there is a DVD sale at the mall today? So maybe they saw the word movie, they heard the word movie, and it reminded them that there's a DVD sale at the mall. So again, it's when something brings to mind something else. Are you going to the hockey game today? Oh yes, I really want to go to the hockey game. That reminds me, we should buy tickets soon. So it's where something previously said reminds you of a different point. So here we have our second expression. If worst comes to worst. Now there are 2 variations on this expression. Some people say worst. Other people say worse. So worse or worst. Both are okay. You will hear both, depending on who you speak to. So what does this mean, if worst comes to worst? Well, it means, when we use this, we're talking about the future. And we're saying, if the worst thing happens in the future, and usually it's followed by a solution. So for example, if you have to take a test, maybe the IELTS, maybe TOEFL, which a lot of you probably will have to take. Maybe you will say something like, I will study hard, I will find a teacher to help me, and practice IELTS or TOEFL questions. But if worst comes to worst, meaning if the worst thing happens, which would be failing the test maybe, I can take the test again. So here, the worst is failing the IELTS. The solution, so the future plan if that outcome happens, is taking the test again. So here's another example. Hopefully this doesn't happen, but if you have a daughter. My daughter is sick, but we planned to go on a trip. If worst comes to worst, we'll cancel the trip. Meaning, if the worst outcome happens and she doesn't get better, she's still sick, the solution is going to be, we'll cancel the trip. So we use this for imagining what's the worst that can happen and what will we do if that happens. Another example is if you're going for your driver's license. You've practiced driving before. You're a little nervous about the test, but you could say, I'm going to give it my best. I'm going to try to pass this test, but if worst comes to worst, maybe I'll retake the test. So again, it's just potential outcomes. What's your solution if the worst thing happens? Finally, our last expression for today. To ring a bell. Now, when we say this, we don't mean to literally ring a bell. We mean when you're reminded of something. It's different, though, from the first expression we used. That reminds me. This is different, and I'll explain how in a second. So, to ring a bell, it reminds you of something, sometimes not so clearly. We often use ring a bell when we're talking about somebody's name and trying to remember who they are. So let's look at some examples. Number 1. Do you know the actor Sam Neill? Maybe some of you are thinking, oh, Sam Neill, that name sounds familiar, but you can't quite place it. It's a little unclear. Well, this is when we would use ring a bell. His name rings a bell, but I can't remember his face. Meaning, I kind of remember his name. I've heard it before, but I'm still kind of unclear. Another example. I gave you $10 last night. Ring a bell? Do you remember? That's what this one means. You can say it to your friends. If you ever loan them money and you kind of want to ask for it back, you can say, oh, I gave you this money last night. Ring a bell? Meaning, do you remember? So again, like what I said with the other expressions, these expressions, it's important to memorize them as a chunk. Ring a bell. So you can use it standalone. For example, here, ring a bell, it's like a question. Ring a bell. Or you can use it as a verb. His name rings a bell, but I don't remember his face. So I know a lot of you may be like me where you can't remember names that well, and somebody says, oh, do you know so-and-so? And you kind of remember, but not quite. That's when you would be using ring a bell. Okay, so let's look at our third example. Does our site, www.engvid.com, ring a bell? Well, if it doesn't, you're still unclear, I suggest you check out this website and take our test. That reminds me, there are a lot of other good sources on this website for you to use. And if worst comes to worst, you can rewatch this video to get a better idea on how these expressions are used. So until next time, take care.